well, you could say subculture, because it certainly was not recognized as culture by the white middle classes, but of black culture. Now, this was also in the middle of great yacht housing. So the planners, they looked at the cities, they looked at the state of the buildings they were in, they started demolishing in order to bring in the highway and the neighborhood units and the centers, etc. So this is a part of this great yacht area. Here you can see it, just before its demolition. Here you can see people being evicted and their houses already being demolished. And this came in its place. Now this is interesting. This is a project that is it's a project by Mies van der Rohe and Ludwig Hilbersheimer. Therefore, it is revered as a kind of a religious icon at architecture schools all over the world, because it is one of the most successful architectural projects in the United States. By Mies van der Rohe and Hilbersheimer, and it is one of the only times where these high priests of modernism managed to realize their views on a complete scale of an entire neighborhood. So here the models, so the planning by Hilbersheimer and the architecture by Mies van der Rohe, it is, I mean, there's right now in Italy an exhibition on this area, on this thing. The whole area has been renamed recently the Mies van der Rohe Historical District. And so it is a fetish of modernism, because it proves that this extremely pure and extremely sharp way of designing, that it could also serve the program of social housing, of public space. All these kind of socially relevant causes can also be done by modernism in a brilliant and beautiful way. So it is a project that shows the human side of high modernism. And it is quite beautiful. But if you see what it is quite beautiful, but here's the central business district, there's the expressway that was brought in, and then this entire area, well, it came into the city, the Great Yacht area with Black Bottom, where tens of thousands of people lived, had their houses, where there was a local community, there was a local culture, there were theaters, bars. It was an incredibly vibrant area. It was immediately adjacent to the central business district, so you could just walk all the way through. It was just this fine grid of every 30 meters there would be a street going into the city, so the city kind of naturally developed into this kind of bit dirty, bit rough, but extremely vibrant neighborhood. And then that was all cleaned up, and in its place came, admittedly, this urban planning and architectural masterpiece. Here you can see it from the Google Earth. These are the two social housing blocks built by Mies van der Rohe, who actually got into a fight then with the landlords, because he said it bothered him that people, they had a choice. Mies van der Rohe was not a bad guy, so he wanted to give people a choice. Either you completely open your curtains or you completely shut them. Or not the curtains, what is it called? The blinds. But of course then there were people who wanted them half shut or half closed. And that created chaos and anarchy in a visual sense, so he couldn't take that. So that was a kind of a controversy. Here you see the low rise. So actually, typologically, it's more or less the same as the other thing, but it's much better done and much more beautiful. And right now, the people who live here are kind of, often they are, it's like a ghetto for progressive white people in the center of Detroit. So it's not people, it's people who are very proud that they are not racists and they live in the center of Detroit. But of course, it's a very strange situation. It's often people from the university or doctors from the hospital who live there. And it's an extremely beautiful area. If you go to Detroit and you are fed up with this kind of post-apocalyptic, or with this apocalyptic atmosphere of the inner city, you can go here and you feel as if you're in Scandinavia. Now, back to this film. This is one of the last images of this film, Detroit City on the Move. And you have this very sophisticated Mad Men-like couple of couples sitting in the restaurant on top of the corporate skyscraper, having their cocktails and looking out over the city. But of course, this is in 1966, something like that. And if they would have looked the other way, this would be what they had seen. Because there was this kind of double, as you often have with cities that start promoting themselves. They start promoting themselves, they start creating enormous urban planning projects, and at the same time, on the kind of ground level of the city, something is happening that they have no idea about. Nobody has an idea about it. It doesn't figure in the stories of the city. It gets denied by the planners. It's too weird and dangerous and underground to be taken along in the analysis and the way of thinking of these modernist optimists. So the fact that the riots in 1967 came was a total shock, a complete shock to the policymakers and politicians and planners, and also the white elites of Detroit. They saw it as they did not see it coming. They thought that they were doing everything for the city to become the most modern and accessible and transparent city in the world, and then this happens. The whole thing explodes in their face. By the way, there were some people who did know about it, and it's something that Tim of our chair discovered, and since then it's a real I mean, in America, I understand that some people know about it. It's a whole it's a school of thought, you could say, that developed in the early 1960s, called radical geography. Now, radical geography is a very weird idea, because geography, aardrijkskunde, has the reputation of being the most boring, the least radical of things that you can do. But there was a geographer in Detroit, active, called William Bunge, who practiced this. And he made a study in the early 60s of a certain area in Detroit. And this study, using geographical mapping techniques, was aimed at he said that geography should be a tool in achieving revolution. Geography should be used to expose the inequalities, the unfairness, the racism, the segregation, and the abuse suffered by the poor classes through the actions of the rich classes. So it was kind of Marxist revolutionary geography. This, for example, is a chart where he shows where commuters coming into the city from their white suburbs, where they run over the black children playing on the streets or trying to cross the streets, who live in these communities in the inner city. So the white commuters, in order to come from their white suburbs and work in the shiny offices of the central business district, on their way in, plow through hundreds of poor black children playing on the streets. Another one is the way, this is a chart that shows how the slums are one of the biggest milk cows for the suburbs around it, and how the slums, the transfer of rental profits. So the rental profits are the highest relatively in the center of the city, because that is where the density is highest, where the maintenance of the houses is lowest, where they are worth the least, but where they are still being asked for immensely high rents of the people who live there. And all these rents are then by what they call absentee landlords, so people who own the house but live somewhere else. The rents are then sucked out of this city center and distributed over the counties around Detroit. And not just through rents, but it can also go, for example, savings, mortgage money, police payoffs, because the police was notoriously corrupt. The police lives in the suburbs, get their money from the people in the center, and then spend it in the suburbs, etc. So this is a kind of, it's kind of using geographical methods as a kind of revolutionary flag. And this is one of the most moving ones in a way. This is a kind of datascape of the amount of toys being purchased. So, and the lowest is, of course, so you have the city of Detroit. The inner city lies here on the river, and then out there you have the rich suburbs. And the lowest lying area is where children have the least toys that are just bought in stores. Of course, these children have toys because they make toys, but the least toys are owned by children in this area. And this was, of course, completely original, and it still is, I think, to use these kinds of data to tell a story. This is another one, pretty direct. The incidences of where babies get bitten by rats. So, William Bunge, or I still have to check, Bunge, B-U-N-G-E, I don't know how to spell his name, or how to say his name. So, on the one hand you have this fantastic project of the city, on the other hand you have this, bread lines. But there was also something else going on in this city that no one really had an idea about. And this something else was this local culture. I talked a little bit about it with what was happening inside the Greater Yacht area with the black bottom and the Harlem Renaissance and how it reached Detroit. But also in Detroit was brewing something. Something was being bred up. Something was being grown that would soon sweep the world. And it's the first really professional black music company that combines the lessons of the Hollywood studio system, where the star is completely shaped and completely created and made part of a nearly corporate program of promotion. With professional script writers and professional directors and professional makeup people, professional prop architects, etc. And here this was done to black music by a guy called Berry Gordy in his own house, Hitsville, USA, he called it. This is where Motown Records was started in 1960. And Motown Records, they said, of course, it used people, for example, these are, I showed this last week, the Supremes, who actually lived in the Brewster Douglas homes. The Supremes were one big example of it. But the most interesting example is probably Smokey Robinson and the Miracles are a good example. And what are they an example of? They are an example of this organized way of shaping a black culture, so that, and also to use some of the forms and behavioral aspects of white culture